So today's lesson is going to be 8.9 notes, factoring by grouping. The top two questions, though, is just going to be a review. It's a little refresher, and it's also going to help us lead into our topic that we're going to learn today. So, factor the following using the area models. So when we factor using area models, we have specific steps that we're going to follow. The first step is what?
Find M and A.
Find our M, and then find our A. What's our M? What's our M?
6 times 20.
6 times 20, which equals?
120.
Okay. And then our A?
23.
Okay, so that's step one. Step two is find what's the M, what can you multiply together to get 120, and add together to get 23. So we're going to have 8 and 15. What do I do with this information?
Put it in the box.
Where at?
Top right, bottom left.
Good.
Put 15 on the top right.
8 in the top right. I said it.
And now, it really doesn't matter. You can put the 15 in the top right, the 8 in the bottom left. Does not matter. I always like to use my smaller number in the top.
And then add
Okay. Now,
add
8
to
and
it.
15, you guys have to remember, is a split of my second term. So what variable goes with the 8 and 15?
A.
6.
A.
I mean A. And then,
Okay.
I was going to answer a different question.
All right. So then what goes in my first area model?
6A squared.
Because now we're filling in the rest of the areas.
And then 20 in the bottom right.
Okay. Now, this is the part that people tend to get stuck on. What's the next step that I'm going to do here?
Factor down 6 and 8.
Not factor, but find the greatest common factor of 6 and 8.
Yeah. And it's,
So what's the greatest common factor for 6 and 8?
2.
Yep, it's going to be 2. So they share a 2,
A.
and they share an A.
And then that goes in B.
So if you can find the greatest common factor without doing the factor tree, you don't have to keep doing the factor tree, okay? But if you still need to use that, please do. Okay, so the greatest common factor becomes my height of my top row. Once I find my height, I can then find the
Like
length. Okay, so 2a times what gets me to 6a squared?
3A
So that becomes my length on the top. It also becomes my
on the bottom.
length on the bottom. And length always goes second, just for the purpose of this assignment, or for this particular lesson. So then my height again is 2a
Times 4.
times 4 to get 8a. And if that's the length on the top, it's also the length on the bottom.
And
5.
then,
So what am I looking for on the bottom?
5.
5. What does that 5 represent?
The height.
So that means it has to work out for 5 in each rectangle. So does 5 times 3a equal 15a?
Yes.
Yeah. Does 5 times 40, or excuse me, does 5 times 4 equal 20?
Yep.
Yeah. So then my final answer is going to be
2A.
Plus 5.
times.
Times.
3A plus 4.
Now, would it be okay if my answer was written like this? Would that be an acceptable answer as well?
Sure.
Based on if I
Yes.
switched my 8 and 15?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I put my 8 down below and my 15 up above, my answer would actually be switched.
I thought you had
Now you're,
3A plus 5, and I was like, that's not right.
oh no. Okay, so either one of these answers is okay. It just depends on where you put your 8 and
Yeah,
15.
you're just reversing them.
Okay, let's look at our next refresher. Now, this one I threw some negatives at you, okay? So you have to pay attention to the negatives as you fill out your area model. So, our M is
6.
times, I disagree.
Negative 20.
Negative 20, which equals,
1, negative 101.
okay? Then my A,
Negative 19.
okay. Now, my M is negative, my A is negative. So what's going to happen to my two numbers?
Positive.
No. If you have a negative M
Both negative.
and a negative A,
Both negative.
look at your notes.
Or-
Look at your blue sheet.
Larger in number.
The larger number will be negative. So that means you're going to either add those numbers together to get 19, or you're going to have to subtract numbers together to get negative 19. So you find 120 on your on your blue factor sheet, and which of those factors can you manipulate to get negative 19?
24 and 5.
Okay,
Or 5 and 24.
Negative 24.
and because the 24 is larger, it's going to be negative. Okay.
5 goes in the top right. And then that
the other one.
Okay, what variable goes with them?
C.
And what goes in my bottom right?
Uh,
Negative 20.
Negative 20 and top left.
6C squared.
Now, looking at 6c squared and 5c, what do I do with those two numbers?
I'm supposed to factor them down, but just be 1. Right?
You're supposed to first find the greatest common factor
That's
and then factor it. So the greatest common factor for 6c squared and 5c is what?
1.
1c.
C. What are the words?
Now, the reason why it's 1 is because if you look at it, 5 is a prime number, right? And anytime you have a prime number, you know that it can't be factored. And then 6 doesn't share the 5, so the only number that they share is a 1. Question?
Yeah, I always say factor down and correct me, so what are the right words?
So you're going to find the greatest common factor of the top row, then factor the top row using the greatest common factor. Okay? Okay, so now, what is the height times what to get to the area? So c times what gets me to 6c squared?
6C.
6c is correct. And if that's the length on the top, it's also the, okay.
And then
C times what gets me to 5c?
5.
And what do I do with that length?
Put it on the bottom.
What information am I looking for in the bottom now?
The height.
The height. So what times 6c gets me to negative 24c?
-4.
Negative 4.
Perfect. And does that work in my other rectangle?
Yes.
Yep, so my height is in fact negative 4. So my final answer,
1C minus 4.
times,
What's
anybody else can help too,
it? Yeah.
6C plus 5.
So row.
and parentheses. Okay? Or again, your answer could also look as 6c plus 5 and c minus 4 times c minus 4,
Oh, crap.
depending on where you put your answers.
I have more pencils at home, but not on me.
I have one piece of lead left that'll fit. Okay,
Fast factor. Can't fast
so
factor.
what we're going to get into now is what we call not fast factor. Nick, you're saying fast factor over there.
I said
Factoring-
can't. That's
Factoring by grouping. Yeah, you can't fast factor these. Why not?
It doesn't have the first variable with the exponent does not have the coefficient is not 1.
Correct. Okay, so
I need help. Put this in there without falling out, please.
let's get into the first example problem. Now, I have not given you guys notes or the steps that go with this yet, and that's okay. Okay, so we're going to walk through this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor this without the picture. So I'm basically taking the area model away. Hey, Dylan, you're really going to want to stay awake on this. Except if you want to stand up somewhere, you can stand up, but I need you to stay awake.
It's not trade pencils.
So you're still going to find the M and the A. So our first step stays the same. We find our M, we find our A. So what's my M?
120.
And what's my A?
23.
Do you guys notice anything about this expression compared to the...
It's the same thing as the other.
Yeah. So what's the MA?
It would be 815.
So basically, example 1, I'm using the same expression from our first refresher. Okay? Now, this is where it changes. What does that 8 and 15 make up?
That would make it 23.
The middle, right?
Yeah.
So-
basically, wouldn't this kind of be like fast factoring but without the table?
It's not really fast.
But what I'm
No,
getting at is you don't
just
need
stay
slow
with it.
factoring.
Let me get through the lesson, and then you can form your opinion on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to keep our first term the same. My second term, Dylan said, is broken up of the 8 and 15. What kind of 8 is that, positive or negative?
Positive.
So I'm going to put plus 8, and what goes with that 8? A. Then my 15 is also a positive, so plus 15. What variable goes with 15? A. And then I'm going to keep my third term the same. So basically, you guys, I just wrote out all the areas without using the area model, correct? So if you look in your first refresher problem, you notice I wrote all the areas from top left all the way down to bottom right, okay? So we're not done though. Now, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into pairs. What does pairs mean?
Like what?
To twos, right? So I'm going to put this as a pair. I'm going to put this as a pair. What I do is I find the greatest common factor for each pair. Okay? So that means for 6a squared and for 8a, I'm going to find the greatest common factor.
It would be 2.
Okay? Yeah, it'll be 2. So they share a 2. But it's not just a 2, it's a 2 what?
Squared.
No.
A.
2a because they share that variable a. So I'm going to put that up towards the front of where I drew that grouping to show that they're a pair. Okay? So then I need to find the greatest common factor for 15a and 20. Now, if you don't remember how to find the greatest common factor for 15a and 20, you can still do your factor trees. And that will bring you to the answer of what? What number do they have in common?
5.
5. Do they share a variable? No. So the greatest common factor is 5. So I'm going to put that slightly in front of the second pairing where I grouped them. Okay? Now with the greatest common factor found for each group, I'm going to factor them. Okay? So I'm going to set my parentheses behind my 2a. And now I'm going to find the missing information. Now the 2a on my area model would represent my height. Right? The greatest common factor represents my height. So now I'm trying to find the length. So all I think is 2a times what gets me to 6a squared? 3a. Then I think 2a times what gets me to positive 8a? And that's a positive 4, right? Okay. Now, what kind of 5 is that? 5 and 20, the greatest common factor, it's going to be a positive 5, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we factor my second group of numbers by using the greatest common factor.
So 3A.
3a, good.
And then 4.
What kind of 4?
Positive.
Okay. Good.
Okay, research.
Yeah. Grab a pass. Do you guys see a grouping that is that similar, that are the same?
3A plus 4.
So we're going to take that group out and they become 1. So we're going to use 3a plus 4. And then what didn't I use?
That,
See it? That 2a.
where,
So basically I'm going to use my grouping and then I'm going to use my greatest common factors.
but you used the 2A.
So now I'll have 2a. And then what else goes with that 2a outside of the groupings? Plus 5. And that's your answer. Now, it could be written like that, or you could choose to write your 2a plus 5
That last part.
times 3a plus 4 first. It doesn't matter.
Once you said 2A, you lost me, but I got the plus 5 part.
The 2a out in front. See how we use this grouping 3a plus 4, how they're the same? We just brought that down. Then the 2a plus 5. Okay. So that is called factoring by grouping. Now, do my answers, are they the same as what we got for our refresher? Yeah. So you guys can factor without the area models. So I'm basically taking the concrete
Yeah, when we
visual.
have the answer above.
So I'm basically taking the visual device of the area model out. And now we're making it a little more abstract.
And that's how
Let's do the next one together. Just so we can get through all the example problems, but I'll give you an opportunity to practice on your own. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. So we have example number 2. What do you notice about example number 2?
it's the same.
As,
Well, same first number, except for variable.
well, no, keep looking. Look at example number 2. It's,
It's the same as the top right graph.
yeah, it's the same as refresher number 2, right? So what's my M going to be? So we have the M and A real fast. So what's my M?
Negative 120.
What's my A?
Negative 19.
And what's my MA?
You mean like the
From the upper one, yeah. We can get,
5 and 20, negative 24.
okay. So we can get that information rather fast by just looking up above at the previous refresher problem 2. Now, here's the new stuff. Who remembers what I'm going to do first? What am I going to do first? No?
Find the
Well, think about when we were using our area models. After I found the M and the A, I started filling out what part of the area model.
the length, height, number.
The area. The area. So what's my first, if you had this area model here, what was the first area that I put right here? What's the first area?
Like the top right corner?
6C squared.
Okay. Now, the second and third area, if you guys remember, is broken up. That negative 19C is broken up to what?
5C.
Plus 5C and
24C.
negative what?
24C.
Okay. So then what's my final area?
Minus 20.
Good. Okay, so now we have all of our areas. Next step.
The thingy that
Yeah, I put them in pairs.
Yeah, group them.
Do you like how I could read your mind when you're talking about what that little thingy was? What do I find with these pairs?
They have the same variable.
What do I find?
what the number that
The greatest
Common factor.
common factor. What's the greatest common factor for 6C squared and 5C?
1.
1 what?
C.
Okay, I'm just going to put C. And now I need to find the greatest common factor for what?
Do you put C like with the grouping, like under the grouping a little bit? Is it like with the grouping then?
I kind of put it down below to the left.
Yeah, I'm saying
Yeah,
it's with
yeah.
it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So now I need to find the greatest common factor for 24C and negative 20. Do you see how those negatives go with it?
Yeah.
So 24, I have 2, 12, 2, 6, 2, 3,
2, 6, 6.
2, 10, 2, 5. So what do they have in common?
2.
And
Oh, wait.
Another 2, right?
Before,
so 4. Now, they're both negatives. So what's going to happen to my 4? If they both have negatives in common,
Its biggest number is negative.
well, no, if they both have negatives in common, then it's also going to be a negative 4. Okay? Do they both have a variable?
Yeah.
Wait, how would it be a negative?
Because negative 24, negative 20. They're both negative numbers, so both of them, they have a
Oh,
negative
I
in
think
common.
I think-
Kind of like our variables. If they both have it, then they are. Okay. Now, from here, we use our greatest common factor to factor it. Basically, we now have the height, we have the total area, we're going to find the length. So I put my parentheses in there to determine what numbers go inside. So C times what will get me to 6C squared?
6C.
Okay, then what?
5.
Positive 5, right?
Yeah, positive 5.
Okay, now this is where you have to be careful. Those dang on negatives get us. So negative 4 times what will get me to negative 24C?
Negative 6.
No,
6.
6. 6 what?
C.
The negative 4 times what will get me to negative 20?
Let me guess.
5.
5, positive 5. Okay? Do you see where you have the same grouping?
Yep.
So we're going to take those and bring that on down. What is that?
6C plus 5.
And then what's my second grouping I'm going to use?
C minus 4.
And there's your final answer.
Alright.
Now, is that similar to the refresher answer
Yeah,
for the second one we got?
Seems,
Yeah.
So come.
Seems easy enough.
So this is what we're doing today. Okay? This is the purpose of the lesson.
How did you 4?
So we had 6 plus 5 because this grouping, because they're in parentheses, can eliminate to 1. And then we didn't use C minus 4, and that's how I made my second grouping. Okay.
Oh, it's like the first grouping like the insides and the second grouping the outsides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Let's take some notes on this.
What's
Write it down, please.
First,
Okay. So again, we had the 4 steps. Find the MA. You guys know how to do this. Rewrite the problem. Keep the first and last terms the same. Split up the middle terms using the MA step. Step 3, group terms in pairs. Then you factor each pair using the greatest common factor. And then we factor the group expressions. Okay, so we have example 3, 4, and 5. So let's take a look at example 3 together and 4 together, and then I'll give you an opportunity to try to example 5 on your own. Okay, so if we're following what our steps say on our notes, the first thing we're going to do is find our M. So what's my M?
6 times 15.
which equals?
130. That be 130? No.
No.
With my calculator, I know I had it out. I put
That was a nice try, though. Well, it's 6 times 5.
30.
Okay, 6 times 1
6.
plus the 3 that you had from 30.
63.
6 times 15 is 90.
90, there you go. And what's my A?
Just
And what's my A?
give
So
up
23 equals 20 plus 3.
I disagree. 20 plus 3 is 23, but 20 times 3 is 60, not 90. So you need to find factors that you can multiply together to get 90, but then add together to get 23. So look on
No,
your
I'm saying
5 and
23 equals
15 and 6.
20 plus 3.
5 and 18.
5 and 18. So your MA is going to be 5 and 18. So if I take 5 and times it by 18, I get 90. If I take 5 plus 18 and add it, I get 23. Hey guys, quit talking, please.
15 plus
Is there a question?
Yes.
What's your question?
15 plus
Yeah,
6
you're
is 21.
Never mind, it's solved.
Okay, you got it resolved? Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 says then rewrite your first term and your last term, but your middle term is going to be broke up with your MA. So Dylan, how would I rewrite this now? Step 2.
Keep
So you said keep the first and last term the same, and then my middle term is broken up with my MA. So what's my first term?
Do the steps out.
What's my first term?
6.
6 what?
D squared.
Then okay.
What?
Then what?
5.
Plus 5. What's the variable that goes with it? So plus 5D. Then what?
Plus 18. D.
Oh,
And
Then 15. Plus 15.
nice.
I have it written right.
Okay. So with that, we now then group our terms into pairs, and we find the greatest common factor of each pair. So what's the greatest common factor of 6D squared and 5D? D. Then what's the greatest common factor of 18D and 15?
3.
I agree. 3. And it's a what kind of 3? Positive or negative?
Positive.
Okay.
It-
Now,
we add-
once I find the greatest common factor, I'm ready to factor each pair.
It's so cold in here.
So D times what gets me to 6D squared?
6.
60.
Then what?
Well,
5. 5.
So plus, because it's a positive 5, okay?
5.
And then I come to my next grouping. So I'm going to use the greatest common factor to factor,
6.
60.
okay?
And then 5 again.
Now, factor grouped expressions. So what's my grouped expression?
D
12 D.
So D plus
3.
times,
Oh, I messed up. Oh, 6D plus 5.
good. I'm going to write that up closer. I'm going to run. So Dylan took the D plus 3 first, and then she took her grouping of 6D plus 5. You can write it that way, or you can write it 6D plus 5 times D plus 3. Either way is okay. Okay?
I messed up the last
I
part.
wrote it in the wrong area. I wrote it in 4.
That's okay. I messed up for third hour. We all make mistakes, right? Okay. Let's take a look at example number 4. So example number 4, we have negative, so we're going to have to watch them. We have 10e squared minus 9e minus 9. Okay? So we're going to find
10
our...
times negative 9 equals negative 90.
Because what did you just find with that information?
90.
What does that 90 represent, though? The M. And then you're going to find the... Which is?
Equals
Negative
negative 9.
And then what's your MA? So now, because your M is negative, your A is negative, your larger number is then going to have to be negative of your factors that you pick.
6 and
6 and 15, yeah.
6 and 15. 6,
Negative 15.
15. That'll be a negative 15. Good. Okay, so there's your step 1 complete.
Okay, E.
The only thing I struggle with is writing it out first.
Okay, so think about it. This middle term is basically split between this.
Oh, I get it now.
Okay, so what do I write? You tell me what to write then, Josh.
10a squared
Okay,
plus 6e
good job.
plus
I
6e.
I disagree with that.
y
Why do I disagree with plus 15e?
minus 15.
Minus 15e because it's a negative.
And then add the negative
I disagree with that. Oh, not add the negative 9,
minus
but
9, yeah.
minus 9. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Please write that onto the board. Okay, good. Next step.
The group them.
So I put them in pairs, and I find the what of these pairs?
The greatest.
Common factor.
Yeah, it's 1 for this.
I disagree.
4.
2 what?
2E.
2e. Okay.
Next one would
And what about for negative 15e and
3.
negative 9?
3.
I'm almost in agreement with you.
Oh, negative 3, sorry.
Negative 3, good.
Gotta
Sue
get
me.
that right.
Okay, now we use the greatest common factor to factor them now.
So it's 5e
Mm-hmm.
plus 3.
Very good.
And then negative.
I disagree because negative 3 times a negative will get me a positive answer.
5, 3.
5e.
So 5e.
Plus 3.
And then
Oh, this one's just like the other one. But
Okay.
easier. This
they're all
would be 2e plus minus 3.
Okay.
Parentheses. And then 5e plus 3.
Or you could write it the opposite way.
Yeah.
Good. Give this one a...
Before you let us do this one.
Okay, so our m is... What's our m? 36. Our a... Negative 20. So if our m is positive and our a is negative, what is going to happen with both my numbers?
Plus negative.
They're both going to be negative. So which numbers, which factors of 36 can I add together to get 20?
Negative 2 and negative 18.
So 2 and 18, those are both going to be negative. Okay,
And then you write it out.
okay.
So 4f squared minus 2f minus 18f plus 9.
Where did you get 36? I know what you did. Okay, now what?
You group them together. You figure out what goes into one.
You used that number, not the MA of that. You didn't use those.
The
Okay.
first one is 2f,
2F,
and the second one is negative 3.
and the second one is... I disagree. Did you know this?
Wouldn't be 2f times 2f times 2f.
No, the
Minus
first, the
2.
greatest common factor is perfect. It's the second greatest common factor. So what's the greatest common factor of negative 18 and 9?
3.
I disagree.
Negative 3, so.
I still disagree.
I just said that.
So do your factor trees.
Oh, 9.
It is 9. And it's going to be a positive 9 because they're not both negative. Okay.
Wayman.
All right. Let's fill it out.
2f goes into the, so you're gonna need 2f, and then
Plus
minus
10.
2,
So 2F times what will get me to...
negative 1,
There you go. Okay.
and then 9 is negative 2f, and then plus 1.
We're off somewhere.
Yeah, I know it's another saying. Oh no,
No, that's right.
17 is wrong.
How?
No, because the second one's a negative and the first one's not.
Were you supposed to?
Okay, so we're going to back up for just a second here. What's going to happen when our front number here is a negative? We're going to make the number below it a negative,
This guy?
okay? So we're going to make, if the front number of our pair is a negative, we're going to make our front number a negative. So that positive 9 is actually going to be a negative 9.
And that should be a positive 2.
And then that will make that a positive 2,
I got it right.
and that will make that a negative 1, which gets us
2f
what we want.
minus 9 and 2.
Times
times 2 minus 1.
Alright, click though.
There we go.
Okay,
Perfect.
use big brain.